Welcome to your Classroom Coffee Break. I'm John Van Dusen, a long-term teacher, coach, and Army officer, and in this episode we're talking about how to balance your teaching career along with your everyday life. Teaching isn't just a job, it can easily take over your entire lifestyle. So how do you avoid burnout? How do you make time for your family, for your friends, and even for yourself and your hobbies? Let's break it down. First, I think it's really important to acknowledge that teaching is tough. It can be a very time-consuming profession between the lesson planning, grading papers, meetings, and that's all on top of all of the physical and emotional and decision-making energy it takes throughout the day just running your classroom. So teaching can be really, really tough. And I think back to my first few years of teaching, I always had papers I was bringing home to grade. I was always sitting at the kitchen table. I felt like I was in college again, grading papers and trying the lesson plan. And part of that was I just had no idea what I was doing. I've obviously been teaching for quite a while now, and I'm much better at that. And I kind of rolls into this next part in setting boundaries where I don't bring anything home. If I need to get something done, I will go to school early or I will stay late and I'll get it done at school. I don't bring papers home to grade. Sometimes I'll do a little planning on my computer, but I physically don't bring anything home. But that is not the case for a lot of people. I've been at sporting events, I've been at school board meetings, and I see other teachers that are there with their bag and they're grading papers. They're trying to get grades updated in the book. And that is a reality. Sometimes there is just too much to do in the little amount of time that we have outside of instructing students. So let's talk about some different ways to help fix that. The first one is going to be strategies for time management. And the first one I already mentioned, but it's setting boundaries. We all have one of these in our pockets and they can be a boundary breaker. It's very easy to just check your email, check your text messages, check your school email. But if you can somehow set it up so you do not get notifications that you're getting school-related issues while you're not at school or at a certain times when you actually set to do work, that is going to help you so much. And a term I use a lot is be where your boots are. So if you're at school, be at school. If you're at a sports practice or if you're at a meeting, if you're at church, if you're at even the grocery store, make sure you are present there doing that thing and not trying to do schoolwork. And that's probably just a good tip for life. I think a lot of us get distracted by our phones, but if you can set a boundary with that phone where you don't get school related things pinging you and trying to give you that dopamine hit while you're not at school, that's definitely going to help. Another way to set a boundary is if you plan on using your prep period to get your extra work done, go ahead and close your door. Turn off your email notifications or close that tab and use that time to get your work done. I guarantee you your prep period is going to be filled with IEPs, team meetings, and other types of things you can't avoid. So if that is your time to get work done, set that boundary, literally close that door and get some work done. That's a great way to set a boundary. You can do that before school or after school as well. Another way you can help maximize your time is to prioritize your tasks. And I did a podcast episode earlier, which I'll post in the show notes, where I talked about the Eisenhower matrix, where it's a way to prioritize tasks into urgent or important, not urgent, not important, where you can actually take those tasks at the beginning of the day that you know have to get done and place them in a system to make sure that you actually do get them done. Some people use some kind of to-do list or a power list. They'll take their to-do list and just grab the top 3 things and move it to what they call a power list. That's another great way to do it. But the bottom line is if you look at a long list of things to do, you might be overwhelmed. So somehow you need to prioritize those tasks. And there's several different ways to do that. Maybe I should do a podcast episode on how to prioritize your tasks. Either way, I will post an episode about using the Eisenhower matrix in the show notes. And there's also a free downloadable at johnvandusen.com that you can get on the Eisenhower matrix. It's pretty slick. Another way to help maximize your time is you have to learn how to say no. You're going to get asked to do all kinds of extra things, and you may be that type of person that wants to be reliable, wants to be involved, and that's great, and you should be. But at some point, you have to be able to say, no, I can't do that. And maybe that's being a leader for student council. Maybe that's working a school dance. Maybe that's coaching a sport where you just need to take a step back and not be as involved or not coach at all, just so that you can get the other parts of your life in order. And I guarantee you the school will find somebody else. They were operating long before you showed up, and they will operate long after you leave. So somehow you have to learn how to say no. And the last two things I'll talk about quickly, and I'm going to post links in the show notes, is maximizing your prep period, which we've already kind of talked about with closing that door and setting that boundary, but also bringing efficiency to grading. I know when I first started teaching, there weren't a lot of online tools to help with grading, but now there are a ton. We have Edpuzzle, Google Classroom helps out. We have Socrative. There's all different types of things. And again, check the show notes because I did a video on this a couple of years ago where I showed just little tricks to even make the grading you have to do manually just a little bit faster. So now that we talked about balancing all of your school items, let's talk about balancing your personal life. And I'm going to make the argument that you need to be just as aggressive in scheduling your personal life as you are your professional life. So whether that's going to the gym or going to church or reading a book, going to the movie, whatever it is that you need to do for yourself, you need to put it on the calendar just like you would put anything else. Make sure you are taking care of yourself. The old adage of you can't pour from an empty bucket. That's you. You need to make sure that you fill yourself up first so that you can help other people. The second part is going to be leaning on your support system. And that can be either your professional support system, your teaching team, which I know my 8th grade team, we have a great group chat where we're talking all the time about different things that we need to do, our personal life, reminding each other of different things that are happening throughout the school day, but using your team to help make you be successful. And that support system can also be outside of school. Maybe it's a CrossFit gym you go to, maybe it's the YMCA, a church group, maybe it's your family, but lean on those people when you need help. Because if you think about it as a teacher, people are always leaning on you, and it's okay to be the one that needs to lean on somebody else once in a while. So embrace those support systems. And the last part I would say about managing your personal life is embrace your imperfections and understand that you're not going to be able to do everything you want to do as long as you get done things that you have to do. And I talk about this all the time when I'm coaching, and it's all about the process. It's not about the product. So there's a lot of sports figures that talk about that. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, they all talk about it's the process of getting just a little bit better every day, doing one little thing every single day. That's actually going to make us better. And it reminds me of, there's a ton of different stories where it talks about, the rain on a rock doesn't affect the rock. It's a lot of rain really hard all at once, but it doesn't do anything. But that drip, drip, drip of a waterfall after years bores a hole right in that rock. So that's you. You need the drip, drip, drip every day, making yourself a little bit better and understanding that sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you're going to be too tired to do what you want to do, but that doesn't mean it's going to be like that every day. And just embrace those days that you have a lot of energy and you are able to go out and do those things. And remember those days when you're having that really tough day that's full of meetings, that bogs you down with work and sends you home emotionally exhausted. So I have a couple ways that you can actually put those steps into action. And then we're going to hear from a couple of my teacher friends that talked about how they work on balancing life. And we'll talk about that for a little bit. So the first one is try to set just one day. If you're somebody who brings your work home every day and every weekend, pick one day and say, I'm not going to bring my work home this day, and see what happens. Is your entire classroom going to fall apart? Probably not. You will find other ways to get that work done. And after you do it for 2-3 weeks, maybe you can say, hey, I don't bring work home on Tuesdays. I also don't bring homework on Thursdays. So again, it's that whole idea of process over product. Another thing you can do is make that prioritized to-do list. Do that for home as well, whether it's dishes, laundry, vacuuming, cleaning up after the dog, whatever it is. Try to use the same systems you use at work at home to help make yourself more efficient so you have more time to do those things you enjoy doing. So now we're going to hear from a couple of my teacher friends on how they manage their work and life balance. So first is going to be Miss Emily Westfall. She is an art teacher at Kingsford Middle School. So let's see what Emily has to say.
My top tip is to start each day with a to-do list. I'm lucky enough to have first hour prep, so I do this every day when I get to school. I prioritize my tasks on the list based on deadlines and importance. So the most important is at the top and work your way down. If you're a workaholic like I am, I have to set specific work hours. For me, it's after school. For others, it could be before school, but I try my hardest to stick to them, saying, okay, I'm going to stay after school on Tuesday, but I'm leaving at 4. End of discussion. That's it. Trust me, setting a time frame will help to avoid burnout, especially in your first 3 years of teaching. Also, if you can, keep work at work, leave your laptop at work, and when you leave work, focus on being present at home.
So there was a lot of really great things in there. I really liked how she prioritizes her tasks with a to-do list. At the same time, she's doing it during her prep time. So she's really maximizing that first hour prep. And I've had first hour prep before. And for me, I'm a morning person. I can get a lot of work done in the morning. But I'm telling you, as soon as those students show up for second hour, you have to be on the whole rest of the day. And that can be really tough. She also mentioned setting work hours and leaving her computer at school. So she's going to stay after school on Tuesday, and she's going to get about 45 minutes of solid time to get her work done. But when she leaves, she's done. So I know she has other things to do outside of school, but by putting it on the schedule and scheduling that time and setting those boundaries, she's setting herself up for success in being able to balance her work and her life. Next, we're going to hear from Mr. Jacob Barnby, and Mr. Barnby is middle school and high school band teacher. So he has a lot of students. It's a very dynamic classroom, obviously, and there's a ton of extracurriculars between band festivals, solo ensemble. There's all types of sporting events. So let's hear from Mr. Barnby.
A solid work-life balance took a long time for me to achieve. As a young teacher, it's really easy to notice that year after year, more and more things go on autopilot and become easier. Grading doesn't take as long, lesson planning comes more naturally, and even the logistics of planning trips gets much easier. The key for me was to finally stop using that as a reason to take on more responsibility. Using planning time effectively, but being okay with not getting everything done during school hours lets me go home after the bell. Then I can recharge and be the best that I can be for my students.
So another great take on work-life balance from Mr. Barnby, and he didn't say it directly, but Mrs. Westfall did, and that is the difference between being a first-year teacher and being, say, Miss Westfall said, a third-year teacher. So some of those things are going to just come automatically easier between lesson planning and grading, but also more complex things are going to become easier. Like Mr. Barnby said, in planning trips, I'm sure planning sporting events with the jazz band and the pep band and the marching band, all of those things, if you have never done them before, that might be the hardest thing you have ever done. But after you've done it for a little while, you remember those lessons learned and you're able to do all of those things better and more efficiently. Another thing I really appreciate that Mr. Barnby said is just because some things get easier and you actually find yourself with more time doesn't mean you need to take on more responsibility. That goes back to that idea of it's okay to say no to certain things and put yourself first. That's not selfish. So the last person we're going to hear from is Miss Newman, and she is a life skills teacher at Kingsford, and she does a lot of really cool things from cooking to teaching her students about different careers available. I've actually gotten to present in her class about the National Guard and Army Reserve, and I know she also has young children, so let's see what Miss Newman has to say about balancing work and life.
How do you balance work and a family life? And take this with a grain of salt because I'm not a 10-year or a 20-year seasoned teacher. I've been at this for 4 years, but there is some things that I've learned along the way that have helped me to do this. And I think the biggest one is that your work can replace you, but your family can't. So family really does take the priority. And I think I started to get a lot less burnout as a teacher once I realized that, and I stopped taking work home. So that would be my advice is don't take work home. And I know that that sounds kind of silly, but find time throughout your day to get your work done, whether that's before school or after school, finding that time elsewhere so that when you go home, you can clock out and you can be with your family and you can enjoy that time and recharge your batteries for the next day so that you can be an even better teacher when you do get to school. I think that Teachers so often want to do everything and get everything checked off of their list. And I completely resonate with that and want that too. But I've learned to prioritize, and there's always going to be something on my list that I have to do and have to get done. And I just need to decide which stuff needs to get done first and what things can wait till tomorrow. So once I started doing that and started prioritizing my time with my family, I actually feel like I became a more productive and better teacher for it.
What great messages coming from Miss Newman there with your job can replace you, but your family never can. And her ability to realize that as a young teacher, this is only her 4th year, is really tough. But it sounds like she has been able to do it, been able to prioritize her family. And it was interesting, she said, because she started prioritizing her family, she actually felt like she was a better teacher. And I think that really goes into that balance that we've been talking about this entire episode, where if you put yourself all the way into your work, you're not going to be great at your family. If you put yourself all the way into your family, you won't be good at your work. But what Miss Newman said is by being able to prioritize her family and prioritize her work and basically being where her boots are, she is actually better at both. So thank you for those 3 that chimed in, Miss Westfall, Mr. Barnby, and Miss Newman. And if you got anything out of this episode, tell your friends, subscribe, like, do all the great things so they can make the next Classroom Coffee Break.